Imagine Rome, almost 5 centuries before the birth of Christ. The city is buzzing with tension. On one side, you have the wealthy families, those who have always held the power, clinging tightly to every bit of control. On the other, the common people, the plebeians, are tired, frustrated, and desperate for fairness. The city's streets have seen protests, even blood. It feels like the whole republic could fall apart at any moment. But here's where the story takes a surprising turn. Instead of swords, the real revolution comes through something much more powerful: words. Out of all this chaos, the Romans do something the world has never seen before. They decide to write down their laws, making them clear for everyone to see. It's a risky move. Just think about it. Until then, only the elite knew the rules, passing them down by word of mouth, bending them as they wished. The poor never really stood a chance. This is the beginning of the 12 Tables, the very first time the Roman people tried to bring order and justice not just to the rich, but to everyone. Imagine the relief of finally knowing your rights, of being able to say, "No, that's not fair. The law says otherwise." For many Romans, it must have felt like seeing a locked door finally swing open. The creation of these laws was no simple task. The Romans sent a group of wise men to study the laws of other ancient peoples, especially the Greeks. They wanted to make sure their new code was strong and fair. When the laws were ready, they were carved onto 12 large bronze tablets and displayed in the forum right in the heart of the city. No more secrets. Anyone could walk up and read them. Here's something cool. Although the original tablets were later destroyed when invaders attacked Rome, the spirit of the 12 Tables survived through stories and writings passed down for generations. That's why, even today, historians can piece together what those old rules said. And did you know that some of the ideas in the 12 Tables still shape the laws we live by now? The idea that everyone deserves a fair trial and that laws should apply to all, not just the powerful, started right here, under the Roman sun. So, as we explore the story of the 12 Tables, keep in mind that what began as a struggle for fairness in ancient Rome became a foundation for justice around the world. And if you're as fascinated by these stories as we are, remember to like this video, share it with your friends, and join us here at Legacy of Empires, because history has so much more to reveal. Picture this: it's 494 years before Christ, and Rome is about to witness something that had never happened before in human history. The common people, called plebeians, are about to teach the world's most powerful empire a lesson that would echo through the ages. To understand what happened next, you need to imagine what life was like for ordinary Romans. Every morning, they woke up in a world where the rules were invisible. The wealthy patricians knew the laws because they had created them, passed them down through whispered conversations in their private circles. But if you were a plebeian, a farmer, a craftsman, a shopkeeper, you lived in constant fear. You could be dragged before a judge for reasons you didn't understand. The patrician magistrate would consult laws that existed only in his memory, laws that his father had taught him, laws that could change depending on his mood or his relationship with the accused. Imagine trying to run a business when you don't know what's legal. Picture raising a family when any powerful person could destroy your life with accusations based on rules you've never heard. This wasn't just unfair, it was terrifying. The final straw came when the patricians pushed too hard. They demanded that plebeians serve in the army to defend Rome, but offered them no protection under the law. They wanted plebeians to die for a system that treated them like strangers in their own city. The plebeians had tried asking politely. They had begged for fairness. They had pleaded for written laws that everyone could see. But the patricians just laughed. "Why should we share our secrets with you?" they seemed to say. "We've always ruled this way." But the plebeians had a secret weapon that no one expected: unity. What happened next was so bold, so unprecedented, that it would inspire oppressed people for thousands of years. The plebeians didn't riot in the streets. They didn't storm the patrician houses. Instead, they did something much more powerful. They simply left. One morning, the patricians woke up to find Rome nearly empty. The plebeians had gathered their families, packed their belongings, and walked out of the city together. They climbed a hill about 3 miles away called the Sacred Mount and set up camp. This wasn't just a protest. It was the world's first recorded strike, but it was bigger than any strike we've ever seen. Imagine if every worker, every soldier, every craftsman in your city just disappeared overnight. The patricians couldn't believe their eyes. The markets fell silent. The workshops stood empty. The army dissolved as soldiers abandoned their posts. Even the servants in patrician homes had vanished. Rome, the mighty city that was conquering the Mediterranean world, had been brought to its knees not by enemy armies, but by the quiet departure of its own people. The patricians tried to act tough at first. "Let them go," some said. "We don't need them." But within days, reality hit like a thunderbolt. Without the plebeians, Rome couldn't function. There was no one to make bread, no one to repair buildings, no one to defend the city walls. As days turned into weeks, panic spread through the patrician class. They sent messengers to the Sacred Mount, but the plebeians had a simple message: "Give us written laws, or we'll build our own city." This wasn't an empty threat. The plebeians had everything they needed: skilled craftsmen, farmers, soldiers, even their own leaders. They could actually do it. They could leave Rome forever and create a rival city that might eventually destroy the empire. The patricians faced a choice that would define the future of Western civilization: share power or lose it completely. Finally, the patricians broke. They sent their most respected senator, Menenius Agrippa, to negotiate. The story goes that he told the plebeians a famous parable about the body and its parts. How the hands and feet once rebelled against the stomach, only to discover they all needed each other to survive. But the plebeians weren't interested in pretty speeches. They wanted concrete promises. After intense negotiations, they got them. Rome would create written laws that applied to everyone, and the plebeians would get their own elected representatives called tribunes to protect their interests. When the plebeians returned to Rome, they had accomplished something miraculous. They had proven that ordinary people, when they work together, can force even the mightiest empire to change. They had shown that justice couldn't be hoarded by the powerful forever. This first secession, as historians call it, wasn't just important for Rome. It was important for all of humanity. It established the principle that governments exist to serve the people, not the other way around. It proved that when people unite for a just cause, they can move mountains. The plebeians' brave march to the Sacred Mount had set in motion events that would eventually give us the 12 Tables, the foundation of Western law, and the idea that justice should be visible to all. But more than that, it had given the world its first lesson in the power of peaceful resistance. After years of negotiation, something extraordinary happened. In 451 before Christ, Rome appointed 10 men called the decemvirs to do the impossible: write down the laws that had been whispered in shadows for centuries. These weren't just any 10 men. They were given absolute power to create a legal code that would govern the greatest civilization the world had ever known. No kings, no senators, no generals could interfere. For 1 year, these 10 men were Rome itself. They worked tirelessly, carving words into bronze tablets that would outlast empires. When they finished, 12 bronze tablets were placed in the Forum, the heart of Roman life, where every citizen could read them. Rich or poor, powerful or humble, everyone would know the rules. Some of these laws would make us gasp today. If you killed someone's slave, you had to pay the owner back. The slave's life was seen as property, not humanity. If you broke someone's bone, they could break yours in return. Eye for an eye wasn't just a saying, it was the law. But here's what's fascinating. Mixed in with these harsh punishments were ideas that seem surprisingly modern. The 12 Tables declared that no one could be condemned without a trial. They said evidence mattered more than accusations. They even protected people from being punished twice for the same crime. One law that would make us smile today stated that if someone sang insulting songs about their neighbors, they could face serious punishment. Even in ancient Rome, people took their reputation seriously. Here's the remarkable thing. Those bronze tablets were destroyed when enemy tribes sacked Rome in 390 before Christ. but their words had already spread like seeds in fertile soil. Roman children memorized these laws in school. Legal scholars studied them for centuries. They became part of Rome's DNA. As Rome conquered the world, these legal principles traveled with the legions. They influenced laws in Britain, France, Germany, and eventually crossed oceans to shape legal systems in places the Romans never dreamed existed. Even today, when you hear innocent until proven guilty in a courtroom, you're hearing an echo of those ancient bronze tablets. When lawyers argue about evidence and fair trials, they're standing on foundations laid by those 10 men in ancient Rome. The 12 tables did more than create laws. They created an idea. The idea that justice should be visible, understandable, and the same for everyone. That no one, not even the most powerful person in the land, should be above the law. This was revolutionary thinking. For thousands of years, kings and emperors had ruled by divine right, their word being law. But Rome said something different. The law itself was king. When Napoleon created his famous legal code centuries later, he studied the 12 tables. When America's founding fathers wrote their Constitution, they drew inspiration from Roman law. When modern democracies guarantee equal justice under law, they're fulfilling a promise made on bronze tablets in ancient Rome. The story of the 12 tables reminds us that justice isn't something that just happens. It's something people fight for, generation after generation. Those plebeians who walked out of Rome didn't just win better laws for themselves. They won them for us too. Every time we demand transparency from our leaders, every time we insist on fair trials, every time we say that the law should apply equally to everyone, we're channeling the spirit of those ancient Romans who refused to accept a world where justice was hidden in shadows. The 12 tables prove that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a sword or a shield. It's a simple demand for fairness, carved in stone for all the world to see. And that's a lesson that will never get old. The plebeians had won their battle, but now came the hard part, turning promises into reality. It's one thing to demand written laws, but quite another to actually create them. Rome was about to embark on one of the most important projects in human history, and they had no idea how to do it. Picture the challenge facing Rome in 451 before Christ. For centuries, Roman law had lived in the memories of patrician families, passed down like precious heirlooms from father to son. These weren't just rules. They were traditions, customs, and interpretations that had evolved over generations. Now, somehow, all of this had to be written down. But how do you capture centuries of unwritten tradition? How do you turn whispered knowledge into something everyone can read? And most importantly, how do you make sure the powerful patricians don't just write laws that favor themselves? The Romans came up with a solution that was both brilliant and terrifying. They decided to give absolute power to 10 men called the decemvirs, literally meaning 10 men in Latin. These weren't just any 10 men. They were chosen carefully, representing both patricians and plebeians, and they were given authority that no Roman had ever possessed before. For 1 year, these 10 men would rule Rome completely. No consuls, no senate, no other magistrates could interfere. They had the power to make any law they wanted, to punish anyone they chose, to reshape Roman society from the ground up. Imagine the weight on their shoulders. They knew that their work would outlast them by centuries. They knew that millions of people would live under the laws they created. One wrong decision could destroy the republic they were trying to save. The decemvirs set up their headquarters in the Forum, the beating heart of Roman life. Day after day, they worked tirelessly, consulting ancient records, interviewing elder patricians, and listening to plebeian concerns. They studied the laws of other civilizations, particularly the Greeks, who had already experimented with written legal codes. But this wasn't just about copying what others had done. The decemvirs had to create something uniquely Roman, something that would work for a society that was half civilized city and half conquering military machine. They debated every word, every phrase, every punishment. Should theft be punished by death or by payment? Should slaves have any rights at all? Should women be allowed to inherit property? These weren't just legal questions, they were decisions about what kind of society Rome would become. After months of intense work, the decemvirs were ready. They had created 10 bronze tablets covered with carefully carved laws. But as they prepared to present their work to the people, they realized something crucial. 10 tablets weren't enough. The plebeians demanded more. They wanted laws about marriage, about inheritance, about religious ceremonies. They wanted every aspect of Roman life to be clearly defined and protected. So the decemvirs went back to work, creating 2 more tablets to complete their masterpiece. Finally, in the spring of 450 before Christ, the moment arrived. The 12 bronze tablets were carried into the forum with great ceremony. Workers erected special stands to display them at eye level, where every citizen could read them. For the first time in Roman history, justice had a face. The laws were written in clear, simple Latin that ordinary people could understand. No more whispered secrets, no more hidden rules. If you wanted to know what was legal, you just had to walk to the forum and read. The impact was immediate and profound. Plebeians could now defend themselves in court by pointing to specific laws. Patricians could no longer change the rules to suit their friends. Justice had become visible, permanent, and equal for all. But here's the fascinating part. These bronze tablets were more than just legal documents. They were symbols of a new kind of power. The power of the written word over the spoken tradition, the power of public knowledge over private secrets. The original 12 tablets stood in the forum for centuries, weathering storms and witnessing the rise and fall of emperors. Roman children memorized their words in school. Lawyers quoted them in court. They became as much a part of Rome as the 7 hills themselves. But then came disaster. In 390 before Christ, Celtic warriors called Gauls swept down from the north and sacked Rome. They burned buildings, scattered treasures, and destroyed those precious bronze tablets that had stood for over 60 years. The physical tablets were gone forever, but their words lived on. Roman historians had copied them, students had memorized them, and lawyers had quoted them so often that their contents survived even when the bronze did not. In a way, this proved the tablets' greatest success. They had become so embedded in Roman culture that they couldn't be destroyed by any enemy. The 12 tables had accomplished something remarkable. They had taken the invisible and made it visible, taken the temporary and made it permanent. They had proven that laws could be stronger than the people who made them, that justice could outlast any individual ruler. When we read those ancient words today, we're not just learning about Roman law. We're witnessing the birth of the idea that laws should be public, permanent, and apply to everyone equally. It's an idea so fundamental to our modern world that we can barely imagine life without it. The decemvirs had been given 1 year to change Rome. Instead, they changed the world. After years of negotiation, something extraordinary happened. In 451 before Christ, Rome appointed 10 men called the decemvirs to do the impossible, write down the laws that had been whispered in shadows for centuries. These weren't just any 10 men. They were given absolute power to create a legal code that would govern the greatest civilization the world had ever known. No kings, no senators, no generals could interfere. For 1 year, these 10 men were Rome itself. They worked tirelessly, carving words into bronze tablets that would outlast empires. When they finished, 12 bronze tablets were placed in the forum, the heart of Roman life, where every citizen could read them. Rich or poor, powerful or humble, everyone would know the rules. Some of these laws would make us gasp today. If you killed someone's slave, you had to pay the owner back. The slave's life was seen as property, not humanity. If you broke someone's bone, they could break yours in return. Eye for an eye wasn't just a saying, it was the law. But here's what's fascinating. Mixed in with these harsh punishments were ideas that seem surprisingly modern. The 12 tables declared that no one could be condemned without a trial. They said evidence mattered more than accusations. They even protected people from being punished twice for the same crime. One law that would make us smile today stated that if someone sang insulting songs about their neighbors, they could face serious punishment. Even in ancient Rome, people took their reputation seriously. Here's the remarkable thing. Those bronze tablets were destroyed when enemy tribes sacked Rome in 390 before Christ. But their words had already spread like seeds in fertile soil. Roman children memorized these laws in school. Legal scholars studied them for centuries. They became part of Rome's DNA. As Rome conquered the world, these legal principles traveled with the legions. They influenced laws in Britain, France, Germany, and eventually crossed oceans to shape legal systems in places the Romans never dreamed existed. Even today, when you hear innocent until proven guilty in a courtroom, you're hearing an echo of those ancient bronze tablets. When lawyers argue about evidence and fair trials, they're standing on foundations laid by those 10 men in ancient Rome. Fascinated by this ancient legal revolution? Then leave a comment, smash that like button, share this with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires, because the past is never truly gone. Picture this. You're walking through the Roman Forum in the year 450 before Christ. The marble columns gleam in the morning sun, merchants call out their wares, and right there in the center of it all, carved into 12 bronze tablets, are the words that would change everything. Not just for Rome, but for the entire world. These weren't just any laws. They were revolutionary. And here's why that matters so much, even today. The 12 tables were absolutely brutal by our standards. If someone broke your leg, you could break theirs right back. If they couldn't pay their debts, they could literally become your slave. Sounds horrific, right? But here's the thing that made all the difference. These punishments were written down. Everyone could see them. Everyone knew what would happen if they broke the rules. Before this moment in history, justice was whatever the powerful said it was. A patrician could wake up one morning and decide that looking at him wrong was a crime punishable by death. The poor had no way to defend themselves because they never knew what the rules actually were. The 12 tables changed all of that forever. Here's where it gets really interesting. Hidden within these ancient bronze tablets was a principle that would echo through the centuries. You were innocent until someone could prove you were guilty, not the other way around. This wasn't just revolutionary for Rome. It was revolutionary for human civilization. Think about what this meant for an ordinary Roman citizen. For the first time in history, if someone accused you of a crime, they had to prove it. They couldn't just point a finger and watch you disappear. You had the right to defend yourself, to present your side of the story, to call witnesses. This was the birth of what we now call due process. The 12 tables also did something else that was completely groundbreaking. They protected private property. Now, this might sound boring, but it was actually explosive. When people knew their land, their shops, their businesses were protected by law, they started investing in them. They improved their farms, expanded their workshops, took risks that led to innovation. This legal protection of property became one of the secret ingredients in Rome's incredible success. While other civilizations were still operating on the principle that the king owned everything, Rome was creating a society where ordinary citizens could build wealth, pass it to their children, and contribute to the economy. It was capitalism before capitalism had a name. But here's where the story gets really wild. These laws didn't just stay in ancient Rome, they kept spreading like ripples in a pond through centuries and across continents. When Napoleon Bonaparte was conquering Europe in the early 1800s, he carried something with him that was more powerful than any army. A legal code. The Code Civil, as it was called, was directly inspired by the 12 tables. Napoleon's legal scholars had studied these ancient Roman laws and used them as the foundation for a modern legal system. And then something incredible happened. As Napoleon's empire spread across Europe, so did his legal code. Even after his military empire crumbled, his laws remained. France, Belgium, Italy, parts of Germany, and dozens of other countries adopted legal systems based on Napoleon's code, which was itself based on those ancient Roman tablets. The influence didn't stop in Europe. When these European nations established colonies around the world, they brought their legal systems with them. This means that today, if you're sitting in a courtroom in France, Brazil, Egypt, or dozens of other countries, you're experiencing the direct descendant of those 12 bronze tablets from ancient Rome. Even in places that use different legal systems, like England and the United States, the principle of innocent until proven guilty came from Rome. When English legal scholars were developing their common law system, they looked back to Roman law for inspiration. And when the American founders were writing the Constitution, they were deeply influenced by Roman legal principles. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the legal technicalities, it's the human drama. Imagine being a plebeian in ancient Rome, watching your family struggle while the wealthy patricians lived by different rules. The creation of the 12 tables was your victory. For the first time in your life, you had legal protection. You could stand up in court and say, "The law says this," and even the richest, most powerful person in Rome had to listen. This wasn't just about creating a legal system. It was about creating dignity. It was about saying that every citizen, regardless of their birth or wealth, deserved to be treated fairly by the law. That's a revolutionary idea that we're still fighting for today. 2,000 years later, we're still grappling with the same fundamental questions the Romans faced. How do we balance punishment with fairness? How do we protect the rights of the accused while still ensuring justice for victims? How do we create laws that apply equally to everyone, regardless of their power or status? The 12 tables didn't solve all these problems. No legal system ever has. But they gave us a framework, a starting point, a set of principles that we're still building on today. Every time a court presumes someone is innocent until proven guilty, every time someone appeals to written law rather than the whims of the powerful, every time we debate what justice actually means, we're continuing a conversation that started with 12 bronze tablets in the Roman Forum. The next time you hear about a legal case or think about your rights as a citizen, remember those ancient Romans who demanded that justice be written down where everyone could see it. They couldn't have imagined that their revolution would still be echoing through courtrooms around the world 25 centuries later. But that's exactly what happened, and that's the true power of the 12 tables. Here we are, sitting in the 21st century, surrounded by smartphones and skyscrapers, and yet every time we walk into a courthouse, we're walking in the footsteps of ancient Romans. Isn't that absolutely mind-blowing? 2,000 years have passed since those bronze tablets were displayed in the Roman Forum, and their shadow still stretches across our world. Think about this for a moment. Before the 12 tables, justice was literally whispered in the shadows. Picture a wealthy patrician leaning over to whisper instructions to a judge, deciding the fate of some poor citizen who had no idea what was coming. The law was whatever the powerful said it was, whenever they said it. But those 12 bronze tablets changed everything. They took those whispers and carved them into metal for everyone to see. Justice became something you could read, something you could point to, something you could defend yourself with. That transformation from whispered law to written law was one of the most revolutionary moments in human history. What's fascinating is how this ancient Roman innovation keeps proving its worth, generation after generation. Every time we see a powerful person held accountable by the law, we're witnessing the victory of those ancient plebeians who demanded written rules. Every time someone says, "Show me where it says that in the law," they're channeling the spirit of those Roman citizens who first demanded transparency. Just look at what happens in countries where laws are vague or constantly changing. Businesses can't plan for the future because they don't know what will be legal tomorrow. People live in fear because they don't know what might get them in trouble. Innovation dies because nobody wants to take risks when the rules aren't clear. The Romans figured this out 25 centuries ago, and we're still learning the same lesson over and over again. But here's the most powerful part of the Roman legacy. This idea that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. Not emperors, not presidents, not billionaires, not celebrities. The law applies to everyone or it applies to no one. This wasn't just a nice idea the Romans had. It was born from real struggle, real conflict, real people fighting for their dignity. Those plebeians who marched out of Rome in 494 before Christ weren't just making a political statement. They were saying that they were human beings who deserved to be treated fairly, and they were willing to risk everything to make that happen. The next time you're watching a court case on television or serving on a jury, take a moment to notice something incredible. The judge sitting up there in black robes, the lawyers presenting evidence, the assumption that the accused is innocent until proven guilty, all of this traces back to those ancient Roman innovations. When a defense attorney stands up and says, the prosecution hasn't proven their case, that's the 12 tables talking. When a judge instructs a jury that they must be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, that's 2,000 years of legal evolution building on Roman foundations. When someone appeals a verdict to a higher court, they're using a system that the Romans pioneered. What makes this story so timeless is that the Romans were dealing with the same fundamental questions we still face today. How do we balance security with freedom? How do we protect the innocent without letting the guilty escape? How do we create laws that are both fair and effective? How do we make sure that justice isn't just for the wealthy and powerful? The Romans didn't solve all these problems perfectly. No society ever has. But they gave us tools, principles, and most importantly, they gave us hope. They showed us that ordinary people can demand justice and actually get it. They proved that societies can change, that laws can evolve, that fairness is possible even in an unfair world. Here's what's really remarkable about this ancient legal revolution. It created a bridge between the ancient world and the modern one. When American lawyers study constitutional law, they're building on principles that Roman legal scholars developed. When judges in Brazil or France make decisions, they're applying concepts that trace back to those 12 bronze tablets. The Roman Forum, where those tablets were displayed, is now a tourist attraction, full of broken columns and scattered stones. But the ideas that were born there are more alive than ever. They're in every constitution, every Bill of Rights, every legal system that promises equal treatment under the law. So does ancient Rome's legal revolution hold lessons for today? Absolutely. In fact, it holds the most important lesson of all, that justice isn't something that just happens. It's something that people have to fight for, demand, and protect. Those Roman plebeians who walked out of their city 2.5 millennia ago were fighting the same fight we're still fighting today. They teach us that laws must be clear, not hidden, that justice must be accessible, not just for the elite, that no one, no matter how powerful, should be above the law, that ordinary people have the right to demand fairness from their government. Every time we defend these principles, we're honoring their memory. Every time we insist on transparency, accountability, and equal treatment under the law, we're continuing their revolution. The 12 tables aren't just ancient history. They're a living reminder that justice is worth fighting for, and that ordinary people can change the world. The echo of Rome isn't just about the past. It's about the future we're still building, one legal decision at a time. And that's a legacy worth remembering. What do you think? Does ancient Rome's legal revolution hold lessons for today? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires, where history's greatest stories come alive.